Welcome back to the CMO Summit. Before we get going with the next helping of inspiring content, we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors for helping us bring this event to your screens. And don't forget to visit our website where you can access even more content and check out our in-person events. We could be coming to a city near you. Enjoy the next session. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the CMO Summit. I'm very pleased to be joined by our next speaker for today, Rupert Bedell, who is VP of B2B Marketing at American Express, and is going to be doing a talk for us on the evolving role of the CMO. So I'd like to welcome Rupert onto the stage.
Hi, Caitlin. Hi, everybody. Thanks for the intro. My name is Rupert Bedell. As Caitlin said, for the last four and a half years, I have been Vice President of Marketing at American Express. And today, I'm going to give a 20-minute presentation on the evolving role of the CMO. And there should be a little time for Q&A at the end of that. Right, so I'm going to try and share my screen and hope that I press all the right buttons. It should be coming up in a moment. Hopefully you are seeing a presentation slide. If you're not, Caitlin, come and tell me and I'll try and fix that. Otherwise, I'll crack on. So what will I be going through? I'm going to talk a little bit about the tenure of a CMO versus other C-suite roles. We're going to look at some marketing trends that are going on at the moment coming out of the pandemic. We're going to look at why CMOs typically fail and what you can do about that if you are in a CMO role or about to go into a CMO role. Some good pointers for setting yourself up for success. And we'll finish off with just some observations I've had throughout my career, working as a CMO, working for CMOs, and some things to watch out for. And as I say, we should have hopefully 5 or so minutes at the end for any Q&A. Before we begin, a little bit of my background. I've worked for a bunch of different organizations throughout a 25-year career, mainly in financial services. Some big brands in there. I started out at Barclays, worked for HSBC for a number of years, NatWest, and currently at American Express. I was also CMO at some other organizations, Moneycorp Foreign Exchange, Unum Insurance among them. So I've operated at different levels in different size organizations and have a relatively good insight on the CMO position. So first off, we'll take a look at the CMO role tenure versus other C-suite. This survey, or piece of research from Digital Marketers, is a nice clean one showing CMO role, average tenure of a CMO role, about 3.5 years. But in all the surveys and research that I looked at, the CMO role is consistently shorter than other C-suite. So typically, different pieces of research set them between 2 and 4 years. So this is very much a kind of average position. This piece, which was a bit more detailed from Spencer Stewart, I thought was quite interesting. So we see a couple of things here. Now it says the average tenure is just short of 4 years, according to their research. But it's the outliers that have been there a long time, which are actually skewing the results a little bit. The CMO at American Express, for example, is, I think, over 25 years in that role. So you've got some organizations where the CMO has been there a very long time, which skew the results. If you actually look at the median, so the mid-set, where the majority of CMOs are, it's more like 2.5 years. So that's more typical to what we see. And it's actually going down in the last couple of years. If you look back to 2014, it's been on the slight decrease. So we're seeing even more regular turnover, even more hiring and firing of CMOs. Now that's against a backdrop of marketing becoming relatively more important in most organizations, particularly since the pandemic. In this piece from Deloitte, is a very extensive CMO survey. We can see that headcount has been growing in marketing more than other functions, particularly in the last couple of years. And 2 things to extract from these charts. Number one is internet marketing, particularly, or online marketing, has grown the most. So 26% of the companies surveyed had grown their internet marketing by headcount of 100% or more. So that's significant. The other thing is that the main increases in marketing headcount are coming in, I think what I would say are mid-sized companies. So if you look at that chart in the middle, it's the employees kind of 500 to 1,000 that's where most or the fastest marketing growth is happening. And we're seeing a lot of this again since the pandemic. Obviously, in the pandemic, a lot of marketing budgets and headcount were reduced, but the bounce back has been really significant. So in spite of CMOs having an even shorter tenure than before, marketing is seen as a more important function. So organizations are investing more and more headcount in marketing. And that's not just true of headcount. You can see that in investments as well. So the same survey tracks growth in marketing budget year on year. You can see pre-pandemic, it's a pretty stable 5, 6, 7% year on year. Obviously, in the pandemic, it drops to pretty much zero and goes into minus. And then you see this significant bounce back coming out the back of the pandemic, where organizations are plowing budget back into marketing at an ever increasing rate. And some of this is obviously the flight to digital. A lot of people are operating in a more digital way post-pandemic than they would have been previously. And organizations are reacting to that by investing more in marketing, more in performance marketing, more in funnel development, digital capabilities, and so on. So it's being seen as a really important function, and yet CMOs seem to be under more pressure than ever before, certainly if you look at job tenure. Now, what else is going on? If you look at purely how the role of the CMO and the marketing function as a factor of that has evolved, certainly in my career, if I go back to a time when I was starting to get into more leadership roles in marketing, say 2005, typically these would have been the skill sets or responsibilities that sat with the CMO. So this is what the organization would have looked to the CMO to provide the leadership on. So typically brand strategy, media strategy. The CMO would have been seen as the center for creativity in the organization, certainly the creative voice on Exco. Web experience, I say web is a bit of an outdated term now, but certainly back in 2005, organizations would have looked to marketing to define what the online experience would be like. But it was really about web design. There was nothing particularly more developed than that happening. Google, if you think about it, was just embryonic at that point. So search wasn't really a thing in 2005. And of course, the very kind of traditional pillars of campaign management and sales support. Typically, marketing would have been, if marketing measured anything at all, it would have been things like traffic or lead generation, generating leads from things like events and so on. And that would really be the key success factor of marketing and by definition, the CMO. Fast forward to 2022, the role of a CMO is infinitely more complex. And I would say top of the list is performance marketing. If you look at any job description for a CMO these days, an organization really is looking for a rainmaker, somebody who fully understands search, display, programmatic, and maybe doesn't know, in a lot of detail what's going on there, but certainly has a very strong overview to be able to translate that to conversations around the Exco table and be able to, make appointments and manage agencies to get really strong digital marketing performance out of them. Digital capabilities, that's more about the building blocks, having a good list of digital vendors that you can appoint to improve your application experience, your onboarding, full funnel expertise. That is something I think that is probably one of the most common failure points of marketeers and CMOs, not being able to communicate in funnel terms to the rest of Exco and C-suite. Of course, investment planning and measurement. There's no hiding place from ROI these days. That's an absolute essential. It wasn't really there in 2005. And the last one being, I think, risk and compliance, which is a much bigger factor in 2022 than it was previously, particularly since the first financial crisis, the introduction of GDPR. I think that's a much bigger area for marketing to understand than previously. And typically these days, a CMO is judged in their success by something much more robust. Generally it's profit or revenue, which is really what they're about. So the role has become...
Sorry to interrupt, Rupert.
Yeah.
Just wanted to say, maybe your slides are buffering slightly. I think they're very laggy. If you want to stop sharing your screen, I might upload a PDF and see if it is slightly smoother.
Right. No worries.
Just so everyone can keep up to track with your presentation. Just give me 1 second and we'll hopefully have it fixed. Cool. Can you see that?
I can, yeah.
Cool. Are you able to flick through with the arrow on the bottom?
Now you've got me. Tell you what, if you know what you're doing, there's not that many slides, so I could just say next slide, okay, and we'll get there.
Cool. Where did we get up to?
We're about there, skills evolution.
Oh, is that?
Previous one to that. Backward.
That one? Oh.
I'm not sure the whole slides are coming up.
It's because it's a PDF.
Yeah, I don't think it's lifted at all.
If you want to carry on with your shared screen, I can share these slides out with everyone afterwards. And
okay.
They can catch up on them. That might be
okay.
Let's do Sorry about that.
Okay. If you unshare, then I think I can share again. Yeah. Sorry about that, everybody. Hopefully they're not too complicated, the slides, so I'm hoping they do what we need. Okay, I'll keep going, and as I say, Caitlin will share them out afterwards, and I'll try and speak to the slides if you're not seeing them in full. Having looked at how the roles evolved, why do CMOs fail? Well, looking at a piece of research from the Harvard Business Review recently, they identified 3 key areas. Number one is misalignment with CEO and C-suite. What's often seen when you look at what a chief marketing officer is focusing on, it doesn't always align with where the CEO sees the organization going. And a very typical example of this would be a CMO who's come in with a lot of thoughts about developing the brand, about establishing the brand, growing awareness and consideration, often focusing at the top end of the funnel, where the CEO is much more minded around acquisition metrics, profit metrics, revenue metrics, and will often be focused more at the lower end of the funnel. And the same is true for C-suite. So that was seen in a lot of cases, just the objectives of the CMO not necessarily lining up with the rest of the organization. Number 2, very, very common. There's a huge diversity in different CMOs on what they're responsible for. It's quite different, I think, to a CFO or a HR director, where the roles tend to be the same accountability in each organization. In marketing, it's really varied. And we'll look at a few different types of CMO roles in a moment. But this one was about a lack of clearly defined role and or metrics. And I think that's something essential to get on the front foot with when you're going into a CMO role, and make sure that your definition matches that of your CEO particularly. And then the third one, which is, I would say this is true in almost all organizations, the CMO expectations exceed the actual authority of the CMO. So you'll often see job descriptions of CMO talking about, being the center point for growth and development across the organization, growing and establishing the brand, kicking on in the next 5 years to double revenue and so on and so on. And actually what the CMO has real accountability for doesn't match that. So it's really setting the CMO up to fail when they don't have the actual levers that they need to grow the organization. So those are kind of 3 areas. And in a moment, we'll look at what you can actually do to mitigate your risk against those areas. Before we do that, I think it's important to say that, all CMO roles are different, and it's not true that, any marketeer can succeed in any CMO role. I think it really depends on the type of marketer that you are. And what I've got on the slide here on one side is, being a really brand-based marketeer. So somebody who's grown up doing above the line advertising, or maybe coming from a creative or media planning background. There's a lot of marketeers out there that are very comfortable doing the brand storytelling, getting under the DNA of an organization and understanding what it's really about. I'd say this is more of what you see at traditional marketeers. This is a traditional marketing background. However, on the other end of the spectrum is somebody who is much more analytical. And actually, in some examples, we're seeing marketers come from things like a financial background. It's unusual typically, but we're seeing more and more of it. So somebody who's much more comfortable with the analytics, or maybe is a pure performance marketer, has grown up doing display marketing or programmatic marketing, and is now progressing to the point of being a CMO. This is a very different marketing education from the brand storyteller. And so knowing what your background is, where your strengths are, can help determine which type of CMO role is for you. So looking at those CMO roles, again, this study, a Harvard Business Review study in 2017, identified 3 different types of CMO. And I thought this was a very good definition. It certainly matches what I've seen in my experience. So starting with the most common, first of all, and again, this would be the most traditional. So 46% of CMOs that they researched fitted into what they're called the commercialization role. So this is a CMO responsible for advertising, digital content, social media, promotions, events. Very, very executional, but not with the broader strategic focus. This would be common in organizations where it's a single brand entity or a single country entity. Often FMCG, marketing is execution, promotions, and will be tracked according to number of leads, number of acquisitions that's acquired through those campaigns. Moving through to the yellow section, 31% of CMOs. This is what we're seeing more of in the last couple of years, is CMOs with a strategic focus. And this is often common in organizations, multi-brand organizations, multi-product organizations, or geographically diverse organizations where there's no single formula to apply in each market or with each product. And therefore, there's a big element of strategy sitting with the CMO. So typically, they'll be responsible for innovation, customer insight, and product design. So it's much broader in scope, but different to the kind of pure executional side. And then there's the green bit, which is really the combination of both blue and yellow. So this is the true CMO role with all of the levers in their organization. So the enterprise-wide P&L role. So you've got the strategy and you've got the execution. And typically this role would actually include what would normally be in a sales director's role or a chief revenue officer, chief commercial officer. It's all rolled into one. So a very, very powerful CMO position on Exco and a very likely candidate to succeed the CEO. And I'd say there are more of these roles in the last couple of years. I think this is where CMO roles are headed. You know, it's a true revenue generating function that understands, you know, the full piece and therefore is a natural fit for CEO. Now, I'm not saying that you should always try and get a role that's in the green. The point I'm making is understand your background, understand your strengths, and then make an informed decision about the type of CMO role that you feel comfortable doing. There's no point somebody who is purely brand and execution focused going into a role that is enterprise-wide P&L. They will find that very difficult to make that jump. Equally, somebody who has an analytical background going and doing marketing execution, the commercialization role, that would be a very unusual step to take. So think about your skills and the type of CMO role that you want. Okay, so roadmap for success. We talked about those 3 reasons why CMOs fail. By definition, eliminating those risks, mitigating those risks is the right way to go to set yourself up for success. So number 1, having a clear role definition and CEO input. I think the last part of that sentence is particularly key. CMOs can very easily define their own role, but it's making sure that the CEO sponsors it from day one and communicates that across the organization and particularly across the Exco. This is what I expect from the CMO. This is the definition of role. This is where their responsibility starts and finishes. Very, very important. So you need to push your CEO on that in the early days as a CMO. And number 2, aligning to CEO and Exco agenda absolutely goes without saying. You may have your own aspirations that you want to achieve as a CMO, but they've got to be lined up to how the CEO sees the organization evolving. And then the third one, just landing on metrics that matter, making sure that they both line up to the CEO objectives and support those, but actually more importantly, that there's horizontal matching across the C-suite. As I think about CMOs and how and when they fail, it often starts with, if the CEO has hired them, there's a problem actually with another member of Exco where there's misalignment of objectives. And then that sort of mushrooms into a bigger problem. And ultimately, the CMO becomes unstuck. So I think it's very important to obviously build relationships across the C-suite, but make sure that your objectives as CMO are very clear and measurable, but line up very well to those of your other Exco members and making sure that you are helping to serve their objectives as well. Okay, a couple of things to finish out on, and then we'll go to questions. There are many aspects to the CMO role. What are the most important ones to focus on to ensure your longevity? These are really from my own experience. I would say there's 2 things. Number 1, making sure that you remain the voice of the customer around the Exco table. A CMO naturally will be seen as the customer representative, but making sure that you keep very close proximity to customers, be they consumers or brokers or small businesses, make sure that you are keeping a line of communication directly to those customers. It's very hard to disagree with somebody when they have the customer viewpoint. And I think it's a very brave CEO who would remove a CMO from their exco when that CMO actually has the customer viewpoint. That would be an unusual step to take. So make sure you stay close to customers and what they're saying. Second one is about marketing technology. I talked about digital capabilities early on. Whether you're responsible for CRM or content management system or your performance marketing system, understanding those things. Maybe you made the hire for the various vendors. It's unusual that anybody outside of marketing would really have an understanding of how those things work. And ultimately, those things are driving the organization. And so, having a good understanding of that makes you kind of indispensable. Again, it will be a brave CEO who removed the marketing person when that person has all the knowledge and of the marketing technology. It's often why CIOs remain in position a long time. People are just afraid to get rid of them because they don't know what they don't know. So I think, being the absolute owner of the marketing technology, owning the vendor relationships, understanding how those things work, makes you pretty much indispensable in the organization. A couple of other things. I think funnel understanding is absolutely key. This would be, one of the main problem areas I see with marketers at various levels, where they are failing to get their message through to CEO or exco. I think an exco often understands the funnel well. And I think if you communicate what you're doing in terms of the funnel, that's a very good way of getting people on side. And just to kind of stay on that point for a moment, I've got a graphic of the funnel up, or the purchase ladder effectively. But this is typically something I see a lot of marketers investing a lot of time at the top of the funnel in brand building, advertising, content, and so on, and generating a lot of traffic and interest. Whereas oftentimes the exco focus is on the bottom of the funnel. So it's, what are we doing with existing customers? Why aren't we cross-selling more? How are we tackling attrition? Why are people dropping off our application pages? Where are the fall-offs on the funnel from lead to account? And so that's something I think that marketers just need to be aware of. The mismatch in focus areas often looks a little bit like this. So making sure that you are addressing those problems early on and aligning your objectives up to the rest of the C-suite. And then the final point, this is something I see a lot in the organizations I've worked, a natural friction between sales and marketing, and where the CMO should focus their efforts and investment. Sales or sales leaders will often want marketing to be in a supportive role, creating events, collateral, doing segmentation, industry specialization, and so on, and helping them cultivate leads and ultimately be successful. Very, very important, but it's going to be set against the need to really invest in digital channels and digital marketing. And really, if your product can be sold online and your customers want to buy it online, my argument would be that's where you should be investing your time and energy. In my experience, it's sometimes much harder to really change sales behavior. You can invest in all of the best tools, all of the best content, all of the best events, all of the best lead sources. But sales often do what sales want to do. And really changing behavior for the long term can be difficult versus making solid investments in digital capabilities, in performance marketing. Those in the long run reap huge rewards. So my bias would be towards making sure that you invest in digital first. That might be unpopular with your sales director, but who knows? Okay, listen, there's a lot in there. I'll pause now. I'm not sure where we're at in timing, but my intention was to go to Q&A. So let me stop sharing, and come back to the presentation and hand back over to Caitlin.
Hi. Yeah, we've got time for some Q&A. I've seen some questions coming in the chat here. So we'll start off with this one from Elizabeth, who's asked, Rupert, how would you describe the ability to run marketing like a business?
How would I describe the ability to run marketing like a business? I think it has to be run like a business. If I understand the question, it's a commercial function these days, and I think there's anybody who's thinking that they can succeed without having revenue-based goals or profit-based goals and an ROI on absolutely everything. I don't know an organization like that anymore. There certainly was 10 years ago, but it's you've got budget accountability, bigger budget accountability than anybody else in the company. So you've absolutely got to run it like it's your own money, and you're running a P&L. So yeah, I mean, look, everything in my presentation really said that that's the way a CMO needs to operate. And yeah, I mean, that's, yeah.
Nice. Cool. And we've got another question from Teresa, who's asked, what is XCO?
I don't know. Oops, XCO.
Yeah, unless I'm reading that wrong, but
maybe it was on one of my slides. I'm not sure. XCO. I don't know if maybe the slide didn't come up properly. I'm worried now, but I don't know. Maybe okay. If she can ask or she can clarify where she got that from, I'll try and answer that question.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Teresa, if you want to pop that in the chat, we can come back to it.
Might be a typo.
Yeah, maybe. We've got another question. When other departments offer marketing ideas, how do you handle them?
Very positively. That's a great question. Yes, everybody wants to own marketing. Everybody thinks they can do marketing. As marketers, we're probably quite familiar with that. And I think some of the best ideas I've come across have come from outside of marketing, other stakeholders or just interested parties coming along. So number one is never dismiss them out of hand. I think it's very easy to be seen as aloof as a marketeer, where you're just not listening to other parts of the organization. You can often get great buy-in to things that you want to do by going out to the rest of the functions and saying, look, here's something we're thinking about with the brand or with this partnership or distribution. What do you guys think? Because people really like to be asked, and then they feel a sense of ownership when you actually go and do that thing as well. So I would say always stay very receptive to ideas and input. There's a difference between ideas and somebody coming and telling marketing to do it this way or that way. And that I have a bigger issue with. That often happens. You'll get a sales director typically will come and say, well, this is what I want marketing to do. I think in that situation, the best thing to do, at the end of the day, marketing should be responsible for marketing strategy. And it's a good idea to take it back a step there and say, okay, I understand the output that you want, but let's sit around the table and figure out the best way to do this, because actually what you've described isn't necessarily the best way to get to your output. But look, ideas, you should be open about ideas. I think there's a real danger for marketing if they are not listening to the rest of the organization, some of which will have brilliant ideas.
Oh, nice. What have we got next? One from Harriet, who's asked, how much input do you think a CMO should be having into product development?
A lot. I think the two need to go hand in hand. If we assume that marketing is generally the voice of the customer in the organization, so if they're responsible for customer insight, customer research, and so on, it's really important that product design and development is being led by customer insight, not by what's internally attractive for the organization. I see so many companies that I've worked for, developing products because they can, and they've seen a way to squeeze a few extra dollars out of the market because they can do this extra thing. But it's not insight driven. It's not responding to any demand in the marketplace. So I think on that front, marketing and product need to be hand in hand. The other thing is that product may design something which is just unmarketable. And I've been in that situation as well. A great product, if you're sitting in product development, you think it's fantastic, but marketing just can't make it work. It's too complex. There's too many hooks and levers. There's too many conditions. And if marketing aren't working with product right at the outset, then that can happen. And I think you've got to be very vocal as a marketer to say, this is great. I'm not understanding how I can market this. And inputting at that stage and saying, well, look, we could do this or we could do that, but we can't do both. So being very clear that your message is going to have to be very single-minded. You're going to have one or two benefits maximum. And so making sure that as the product takes shape, you've got in your mind ultimately the headline or the ad that you're going to go to market with. I often jump ahead sometimes at early product development meetings because I need to visualize what we're going to say when this thing is live, and being able to call out and say, look, it's already too complicated. You're going to have to boil it down a little bit. So I think the answer to that one, Harriet, is very close.
Nice. I think Harriet's also just explained what an XCO is in the chat there. I think executive committee.
Exco, sorry.
Yeah,
I was saying the
I've
word
read it
Exco.
wrong.
No. So I mentioned Exco a million times, and exactly that. It's executive committee. I shortened it as EXCO. So that's what I mean. It's basically the C-suite group. Apologies for that one. So all of the people who report to the CEO. So your chief financial officer, chief HR officer, chief marketing officer, chief product officer, and so on and so on. Sorry, I should have made that clear.
Cool. We can squeeze in one more question, I think. We've got one from Alec, who's asked, what methods do you use for customer centricity and how do you get that customer knowledge?
Speak to customers. It's a very obvious answer, and I apologize for it being maybe oversimplified, but there's no substitute for listening into customer calls, for going along to customer meetings, for having customer focus groups, have them come around in the evening, a glass of wine, nibbles, talk about different things, different products, your own brand. You can set those up through an agency, you can run them in-house, but there's just no substitute for getting your own customers in and listening to them, or going on a sales call and listening in. When I join an organization, it's the thing I put at the top of my priority list is spend as much time as you can just listening to people make the calls. You get a very clear understanding of what's going wrong, what's going right, why people buy the product, why people get rid of the product, why our sales guys can't sell it, why they can sell it, what works, what doesn't work. And then when you go into arguments later on, or debates rather, later on in your career, and maybe the product guys want to do something different, and you want to, being able to say, look, I listen to customers and this is what they said. It's so hard to argue with that viewpoint when somebody's really close to customers. So just being, getting that exposure to customers at every possible point there's no substitute for that. It's absolutely key.
Nice, cool. Well, thank you so much, Rupert, for that session. It was great. It seems everyone really enjoyed it. Lots of questions. I'm sorry if we didn't get to everyone's questions, but we are out of time. And I'm sure Rupert wouldn't mind if you reach out on LinkedIn with any other comments or thoughts on that. Also, if you want to download the slides, they are linked at the top of the chat. There's a Google Drive link where you can download them there if you want to check them out. But yeah, big thank you to everyone for joining us for this session. We've got lots more to come today, so stay with us. You can carry on the conversation in the feed at the top of the event page as well, if you want to carry on chatting between sessions. But yeah, thanks, Rupert, and thanks everyone for attending.
Cheers. Thanks, Caitlin.
Bye.